The first cameras to arrive in Lisbon that Friday evening caught only fragments. A crimson sleeve rising in a frame, a sea of pastel Congress lanyards swaying, a ripple of faces turning toward a sound no microphone could parse. Most streams cut out immediately, their compression algorithms misreading the sudden sonic spike as corrupted data. Viewers at home assumed the feed had frozen. Another technical hiccup in a week already saturated with faulty Wi-Fi and overscheduled panel discussions. Yet inside the International Pastoral Congress Hall, nobody thought about bandwidth. Time itself felt suspect. Breaths prolonged, blinks delayed, hearts thudding in a synchrony no conductor had signaled. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle's voice was vibrating at a frequency somewhere between anchor chain groan and whale song, and every sentence he had prepared in polite conference English had dissolved into a single utterance that sounded like architecture discovering how to chant. A Jesuit journalist too rose from the dais would later insist he smelled salt air and distant rain the instant the sound left the cardinal's lips, as if a shoreline had displaced the carpeted stage. A Ghanaian seminarian muttered, "This is a tsunami," though no one around him could explain what was flooding whom. Meanwhile, across linguistic boundaries that usually require headsets and frantic translators, thousands experienced the identical internal subtitle. The name is spoken not with the tongue, but with the soul that kneels. Portuguese delegates heard flawless Portuguese, French pilgrims heard courtly French, Tagalog speakers heard Tagalog bright as market dawn, and a startled software engineer from Seoul would swear she heard the phrase in Gyeongsang dialect, the way her grandmother used to pray when boiling rice at dawn. The engineer recorded the sensation in her notes app, but no audio file captured it. Phone showed only flatline silence during the 10-second span. From the press gallery, a BBC veteran whispered, "Pentecost, but upside down," and shoved his thumb onto record. The footage captured Tagle's throat flexing, candle flames bending toward him, and a section of hardwood dais quivering like a timpani struck from below. Then the cardinal blinked, smiled his usual gentle smile, and continued in impeccable conference English. "And so, in gratitude, let us close our time together." The illusion, or revelation, snapped shut, leaving aftermath instead of explanation. By dawn, the keywords Lisbon tongue, 959 breath, and unregistered glossolalia were trending on every continent. Vatican servers, unaccustomed to secular Reddit surges, throttled. A late shift technician diverted overflow to a dormant cloud cluster once used for digitizing papal bully. It melted under request for comment. Meanwhile, Cardinal Tagle, unaware that his likeness now dominated millions of split screens, had already flown to Rome, a tiny leather journal clutched in his jacket pocket. His first entry, scribbled somewhere above the Tyrrhenian Sea, read, "I felt light not light, but the shape light takes in the dark behind closed eyes." Then below, in steadier ink, "Why do I remember what was never taught?" Waiting on the ground were members of the Secretariat for Communications Linguistic Anomalies Commission. 5 linguists, 1 psychoacoustician, sworn to NDAs whose penalty clauses cited canon law and Italian civil statutes. They hustled the cardinal past the press, installed him in the ancient guest wing of the Pontifical Filipino College, and posted a Swiss guard outside the suite who did not know why his assignment required a stopwatch synced to 9:58 a.m. and 9:58 p.m. local time. Inside, Tagle slept for 12 hours. Sensors placed under his mattress detected a subtle tremor radiating from his diaphragm every 9 minutes 33 seconds, a rhythm later matched to the average tide cycle in the Sea of Galilee. While the cardinal slept, the commission dissected the raw audio. Traditional spectrograms proved useless. The primary waveform displayed mirror symmetry, rising and falling as though the file had been folded along its median. When reversed, the waveform collapsed into a single cat-eye pulse. 3 ridges nested inside one long trough. Forced alignment software that capably translates Khoisan clicks and Amazonian whistles produced only a blank transcript line labeled non-human lexeme. The psychoacoustician suggested feeding the pulse through a generator designed to remap sonic data into 3-dimensional meshes. The resulting point cloud resembled a torus with its top blown open and three equidistant flares along the rim. The same geometry later doodled by schoolchildren who claimed to hear quiet thunder when Tagle's name appeared on television. Meanwhile, a different drama unfolded at the Pontifical Gregorian University, where Father Miguel Elazar stormed into the paleography lab, brandishing a parchment fragment he had rescued from an uncatalogued box of Syriac contracts. He slapped it onto the light table, his fingertips trembling. Across the fragment's grain ran nothing but rhythmic intervals. Thick strokes, gaps, thin strokes, triple gap, thick stroke. A Morse code without dots or dashes, only breath marks. By aligning the fragment's pattern against the Lisbon audio's amplitude envelope, Elazar demonstrated a 1-to-1 match. Not semantics. Pulse, he told baffled colleagues. Hear me. The parchment recorded not what was said, but how saying was shaped. He begged access to the commission's secure server. They declined. So he photocopied the fragment 10 times, slipped copies under the doors of every office in the Secretariat of State, and scrawled in Latin across each sheet. Questa non est lingua, said liturgia. This is not language, but liturgy. The Pope, Leo XIV, was roused at 3:14 a.m. for an emergency briefing. His reputation as a philosopher pope who scribbled marginalia in Aristotle when insomnia struck meant aides often woke him from metaphysical oddities. Yet nothing prepared them for the scene that greeted their arrival. The pontiff pacing in wool slippers, eyes bright, his own telescope and star charts spread across the desk. When Solomon dedicated the temple, he said, "The cloud filled the house of the Lord, so the priests could not stand to minister." Scripture does not name the cloud. It theophanizes it. What happened in Lisbon may be similar, phenomenon rather than phoneme. He asked for silence, cupped a tiny earbud, and listened to the file. Once, twice, a third time. Then he asked, "Have you subtracted the silences?" "Silence," they answered, "has no data." "On the contrary," he said, "if the God of Sinai spoke in thunder, yet Elijah found him in a whisper, we must measure the blank." Under papal instruction, the commission isolated 3 seconds of absolute signal null. This was not decibel zero, where microphones still record thermal noise. It was data absent, file registers reporting not a number. They inverted the void in a spectrographic negative and watched the torus glyph re-reveal itself, now shimmering like a halo punched through fog. The Pope drew it on a yellow post-it, labeled it Crown of Breath, and pinned it to his corkboard alongside a sketch of Kepler's Mysterium Cosmographicum. "Geometry evangelizes," he murmured, half to himself. "Perhaps existence once sang a single chord, and every galaxy still hums its overtone." Before the Curia could codify a response, the world began staging its own theology. At 9:58 in Tokyo, digital billboards glitched, showing a blank pearlescent screen that pulsed 3 times. In Nairobi, schoolchildren paused mid-recitation, eyes unfocused, then resumed without missing a syllable. In Rio de Janeiro, a carnival rehearsal halted as dancers froze mid-samba, while the surdo drums went inaudible though hands kept striking skins. Drone footage revealed flocks of pigeons pinwheeling into a perfect spiral above St. Peter's Square, their shadows forming the open circle sigil. Weather stations on 3 continents logged a micro-drop in barometric pressure lasting exactly as long as the Lisbon silence. Meteorologists, stumped, coined the term microcesus, then abandoned it when they discovered the anomaly did not behave like air at all. Philosophers, hackers, and conspiracy vloggers plunged into the fray. One data artist mapped every instance of a 9:58 pause against global broadband latency spikes and discovered a faint echo exactly 3,452 milliseconds later, long enough for a terrestrial signal to bounce once off the lunar surface. A Cambridge astrophysicist reanalyzed radio telescope archives and noticed that a low-frequency burst from the Horsehead Nebula correlated with the Lisbon timestamp to within a millisecond. She published a preprint asking whether the universe itself might be participating in a call, in response laterally across light years. Extremist forums declared the event a false flag psyop designed to unify world religions under papal authority. Stock markets yawned until a hedge fund AI misinterpreted spikes in number 958 to mean a Chinese economic coup. The Dow drooped 180 points before lunch. Inside Vatican walls, the commission fought over nomenclature. Was it recurrent glossalic activation, pre-symbolic resonance, or acoustic ecchodent? The psychoacoustician resigned, citing nightmares of breathing cathedrals. 3 translators assigned to monitor Tagle's daily masses submitted joint resignations. We are no longer interpreting him. We are interrupting something sacred. A Carmelite novice, hearing the Lisbon clip during lunch duty, levitated half an inch off the refectory floor, though eyewitnesses argue whether it was levitation or the floor heaving upward. Rome's urban sewers, already prone to sinkholes, registered micro-fractures in triangular clusters. Through all this, the Cardinal himself grew thinner, quieter. He slept little, ate less, yet radiated a serene gravity. Cameras glimpsed him slipping into the Oratorio de' Croci Sinciosa night after night. A hidden mic planted by Italian journalists recorded only a tri-pulse hum, like a heartbeat amplified through stone. On the 3rd night, a marble acanthus leaf above the chapel door reportedly unfolded itself to full bloom. Skeptics suggested heat expansion. Stonecutters countered that the acanthus had been carved fully unfurled since 1642. On the 4th night, again at 9:58, the phenomenon escalated. The 3-second world pause occurred, as usual. But this time, inside the chapel, Tagle exhaled and a second voice replied. Unlike the Lisbon tongue, the answer was faint, woven beneath human hearing. Oscillation at 14 Hz, technically infrasonic, the same frequency elephants used to communicate across savanna plains. Accelerated 43 times, the reply resolved into the single English word returned. An alarm technician sped the clip to the Pope. Leo XIV listened, folded his hands, and said, "Every sacrament has 2 ministers, one visible, one invisible. It appears the invisible party has answered." 2 days later, Tagle boarded a train for Assisi, accompanied only by Father Elazar, and 2 plain-clothes gendarmes instructed not to blink at 9:58. The slow Umbrian countryside rolled past, vineyards luminous under late summer sun. Tagle sat silent, journal open but unused. At precisely 9:58 a.m., the train's brakes hissed, though they had not been applied. Passengers leaned as though the carriage had tipped, and Tagle whispered 3 syllables that microphones later failed to locate on any channel. A child looked up and told her mother. He said God's name. The mother, a lapsed Lutheran tourist, wept without understanding why. The conductor reported clocks aboard freezing for 3 seconds, though his watch kept ticking. A timepiece later examined to discover its quartz crystal had fused into a triangular shard during the pause. Assisi prepared for pilgrimage influx, but Tagle avoided basilicas thronged with cameras. Instead, he descended to the crypt where St. Francis lies. At 9:58 a.m., barometric slump bowed every year inside 20 meters. Witnesses report seeing air shimmer as though heat haze had infiltrated shadowed stone. Tagle later recalled not hearing, but recognizing a trisyllabic memory move through his ribs the way a bell resonates through metal rather than air. A candle flame inverted, burning downward into wax, smoke scribbling the open circle glyph above the tomb. Friars collapsed, tourists fainted. Outside, a stray dog howled thrice and fell silent forever. The Vatican Crisis Office braced for public frenzy. Protestant theologians drafted position papers on nonverbal revelation. Imams discussed pre-Abrahamic echoes of the name. Buddhist scholars compared the tri-pulse to the pranav aum. Social media erupted in split-screen debates. Neuroscientists arguing micro-temporal seizure loops. Physicists proposing local space-time dilation. Mystics proclaiming parousia. The phrase, "he listened," lit projection art on skyscrapers in Melbourne and graffiti in Johannesburg. A London grime artist sampled the Lisbon bass pulse under lyrics about breath theft and sold 500,000 downloads overnight. Facing global vertigo, Pope Leo summoned Tagle privately. The meeting, according to a leaked partial transcript, unfolded in the papal apartment's dim library at dawn. The Pope asked whether Tagle felt spoken through or spoken to. Tagle answered, "I gave my voice to someone who had no tongue left on earth." The Pope, does he seek to teach? Tagle, tears streaking, no, to remember, and to be remembered. The Pope asked what remained. Tagle answered, a fourth syllable. The Pope, sound or sense? Tagle, presence. It will not exit the lungs. It will fill them. Hours later, Vatican astronomers detected a 3-second bloom of microwave background irregularity, like a match strike against cosmic wallpaper. It emanated not from deep space, but from the vicinity of the moon's far side, which radio telescopes often use as a quiet zone. The irregularity's waveform mirrored the Lisbon pulse, but elongated, a breath drawn rather than released. Tagle, shown the data, whispered he is inhaling. The phrasing unsettled the Jesuit physicist present, who later Googled parable of the prodigal son exhale and found only poetry blogs referencing the father's breath caught in welcome. That evening, Tagle delivered an unannounced homily in the courtyard of the Pontifical Filipino College to a spontaneous crowd of seminarians, gardeners, nuns, journalists, and a lost group of German tourists. He spoke softly about fishing with his grandfather, about nets cast in a water so smooth it reflected stars. When the net rose full, the stars were missing, he said, because we had scooped them into our boats. The fish glowed, and we were afraid. So we tossed everything back, even the stars. God did not scold us. He only asked whether we'd noticed how the water itself had shone. Listeners felt the courtyard tilt toward oceanic stillness. Some swore they smelled brine. At 9:58 p.m., courtyard lamps dimmed, cicadas hushed mid-stridulation, and Tagle's body slackened. He inhaled, chest expanding to improbable capacity. Hold, 3 seconds, and then nothing emerged. Instead, every individual present felt a phrase pour through inner marrow. I am here, threaded with a warmth so absolute several fainted from joy. A Swiss guard leaned on his halberd weeping. A journalist unfamiliar with prayer muttered amen without conscious intent. Seismographs under the Lazio hills plotted a perfect equilateral triangle of motion beneath Rome's crust, amplitude negligible but geometry exact. The Pope's private secretary annotated that evening's diary. 958 he listened, 2158 we all breathed. The mystery now outstripped both vocabulary and containment. Still, the Vatican issued no miracle proclamation, mindful of centuries in which over-eager credulity had marred credible sanctity. Instead, a single sentence communique stated, "The Holy See gives thanks for all gifts of the Spirit and continues to discern." Analysts, starved for narrative, flooded the vacuum with speculation. Was Tagle the final pope of St. Malachi's list? Had Jesuits engineered a sonic weapon? Was the glyph an alien sunflower? In Manila, street vendors printed 20 Cuban pesos stickers reading 958. Listen and sold out in hours. Charismatic revivals timed worship sets to 958. Yogis timed pranayama the same. Atheists launched synchronized silence live streams, ironically, and found themselves crying without irony. Hidden in the Pontifical Secret Archive, curators inserted a new shelf tag, Ciro Reverter, the speech that returned. Beneath sat a steel document safe containing the Taurus printout, the parchment fragment, the inverted spectrogram, and a plain ivory envelope sealed with red wax, addressed simply a future shepherd, open when silence speaks again. The archivist, a laywoman from Krakow, logged the entry and noted in her diary that the room's temperature felt like sunrise, although the fluorescent lights unchanged. She ended her note, 958 he listened, 959 he may speak. Months unspooled, Tagle resumed limited duties, celebrating Mass in the Collegio Chapel to modest groups. He never repeated the Lisbon voice. Yet at unpredictable intervals he would pause mid-homily, gaze beyond walls as though reading script written on air, and smile so gently congregants leaned forward, only to exhale when he resumed in steady Filipino, tinged English. The world gradually wove the phenomenon into myth cycle. Novels, operas, VR experiences where users explored suspended time cathedrals. A Seattle startup offered 958 breathing retreats, touting significant reductions in cortisol levels. A renowned skeptic spent 60 days deconstructing the video frame by frame, then ended his lecture with the admission, "I cannot disprove the silence." On the first anniversary, journalists pressed for comment. Vatican Press Secretary Matteo Arini responded, "God owes us no encore." Yet pilgrim numbers spiked in Lisbon, Assisi, Rome. At 9:58, plaza crowds quieted themselves in voluntary hush. In one drone shot, the throng's stillness resembled a human ear pressed against the sky. Meanwhile, deep in the Vatican Observatory atop Castel Gandolfo, an astrophysicist's cross correlated cosmic microwave ripples with archival seismograph triangles and discovered recursive patterns spiraling outward like Fibonacci echoes. She drafted a paper proposing that space-time occasionally holds its breath to recalibrate coherence, perhaps triggered by conscious receivers capable of voicing the primordial chord. Peer reviewers balked. Anthropic bias, mystical overtones. She countered by citing Elazar's parchment. In the margin she wrote, "If matter remembers its maker, why shouldn't it shudder when hailed?" Pope Leo, older now, thinner too, sat for an interview on his 90th birthday. Asked about Lisbon, he said, when Moses asked God's name, he received a verb, Haya, I am. It was enough. Perhaps at Lisbon creation heard not new curriculum, but the reprisal of that verb, being recognized being. And if the universe stands still for 3 seconds, who are we to fear? Existence is merely bowing. The interviewer asked whether further manifestations were anticipated. The Pope smiled, eyes bright as early Advent candles, and replied, "The silence taught us the syllabus." The next lesson belongs to listening students. 2 weeks later, gardeners pruning olive trees behind the Pontifical Filipino College found Cardinal Tagle sitting beneath branches shimmering with cicadas. It was 9:55 a.m. Sunlight patched the courtyard floor. The Cardinal raised a finger to lips, shoo, eyes sparkling with mischief. 3 minutes ticked. At 9:58 a.m., shadow cooled the garden, though the sun remained unclouded. Cicadas stopped. Breeze stilled. Leaves poised mid-quiver like actors caught by stage freeze. Then no grand tongue, no cosmic hum. Only birdsong resuming, ordinary as daily bread. Tagle laughed, a bright, free sound. "He is not a showman," he said to the puzzled gardeners. "He's a father. Sometimes he just wanted to sit in the quiet with his children." He stood, brushed soil from his cassock, and walked toward the refectory. Behind him, an olive branch released 3 olives in silent succession, landing in soil to form an equilateral triangle. Nobody noticed until an hour later. By then, Tagle was pouring coffee for dishwashers, humming a Filipino lullaby that translated loosely, "Sleep now. Stars, tomorrow the sea will hold you." One dishwasher froze, recognizing harmonics from the Lisbon file hidden in the lullaby's low notes. He whispered to a fellow worker, who shrugged. Maybe heaven has more than one melody. That evening, the dishwasher wrote an anonymous blog post that went viral. "The miracle is not that clock stopped. The miracle is that they started again, and we still have time to learn how to kneel with our souls." The post ended, "At 9:58 tomorrow, try listening. If you hear nothing, keep listening. Silence is maybe just the first syllable." Listeners multiplied. Radios worldwide observed voluntary dead air breaks at 9:58. Fitness apps sent reminders, pause, breathe. Streaming giants offered 3-second silent spots between shows. Neuroscientists documented subtle coherence spikes in global EEG datasets. Carbon monoxide levels in downtown areas dipped microscopically, 3-second reprieves from traffic churn. Environmentalists lobbied for a daily 9:58 stoppage, citing measurable drops in grid load. Skeptics mocked piety for the planet, yet numbers told stories. A global hush could cool a city fractionally in midsummer. By the second anniversary, scholars convened in Jerusalem for a symposium titled Echoes of the Name. Muslim, Jewish, Christian, Hindu, secular scientists, all trading notes on tri-pulse anomalies. A Hasidic rabbi suggested the Lisbon sound might correspond to the dot of the Shalshala cannellation, elongating an act of hesitation before divine encounter. A Sufi mystic countered that hesitation is a form of intimacy. God draws breath, creation draws near. A quantum information theorist speculated the silence gap might encode a zero-knowledge proof of divinity, evidence without revelation. The conference ended in open-air prayer on the Mount of Olives. At 9:58 a.m., shepherd's boy leading goats nearby raised a reed pipe and played three notes that matched the Lisbon bass line an octave up. Goats bleated amen. Back in Rome, the Pope's health waned. He summoned Tagle for final counsel. In the sick room, Leo pressed a folded parchment into the Cardinal's palm, the ivory envelope from the archive. "For whoever stands here next," he said, "tell them to guard the gap." He added, voice a whisper, "You have carried the air faithfully." Tagle answered, "I was only the air." The Pope smiled, eyes crinkling despite morphine, and repeated, "Only? Air bears the breath bears the word bears the world." He closed his eyes. Tagle remained until 9:58 p.m., holding the Pope's hand as pulse fluttered then steadied. 3 soft beats, pause, 3 soft beats. The monitors recorded nothing unusual, yet nurses later described a fragrance of ocean wind filling the corridor for exactly 3 seconds. Leo XIV died at dawn. Conclave speculation roared. Odds makers favored a Latin American cardinal with strong diplomatic chops, but popular devotion flooded social channels pleading for Tagle. He himself dismissed chatter. "I am voice, not echo chamber." Nevertheless, the day ballots were to be burned, infrared cameras atop rooftops recorded a plume of smoke rising from the Sistine chimney before votes commenced. The smoke dissolved after 3 seconds. Analysts argued it was condensation. Pilgrims claimed it traced the open circle glyph before vanishing. Regardless, the first ballot produced an unprecedented 2/3 majority. Luis Antonio Tagle, regnal name Leo XV, chosen on the hour 9:58 a.m., thunder cracked though sky remained clear. When he stepped onto the balcony, crowds noted his papal mote seta fluttering outward 3 times though wind speed registered 0. His first words were ordinary. "Dear brothers and sisters, buon giorno." Then he said nothing else for 3 seconds. Cameras continued rolling. Some swore they felt their own lungs rise and fall in perfect unison. When Tagle resumed, he spoke of mercy, of listening, of silence as seedbed for astonishment. Analysts later clocked his inaugural blessing. Exactly 8,000 words, minus the 3-second gap. Since that inauguration, the world has not wholly regained pre-Lisbon tempo. Transatlantic flight crews note headwinds slacken for 3-second windows. Orchestras schedule rests of mysterious power. Silicon Valley engineers incorporate pause algorithms to reduce server heat. Parents teach children to still themselves at 9:58, calling it finding the hush. Skeptics remain. They point to social contagion, neural entrainment, mass delusion. Yet even skeptics admit the hush bears fruit. Fewer traffic accidents logged during the tri-second window, more calls to relatives, tiny gestures of courtesy. An MIT meta-analysis confirms a measurable drop in global cortisol during synchronized pauses. The study ends, drolly, perhaps silence is the cheapest public health intervention yet discovered. As for Leo XV, he references Lisbon rarely. Once, addressing the UN, he concluded, "Our planet already knows how to heal. It taught us when it stood still for a breath." Another time, meeting musicians, he quipped, "Every symphony is a search party for the note that began the universe." Keep listening. Pilgrims still flock to the sealed Oratorio de Croce Senziosa, now guarded by discreet Swiss guards. They cannot enter, so they press ears to ancient stone. Some claim to hear a caught heartbeat. Others hear nothing but leave at peace. The Vatican permits no excavations, yet quietly reinforces the crypt with carbon fiber bracing, should the breath decide to return in structural form. Inside the hidden archive, the steel safe remains unopened. Dust gathers lightly. The archivist sometimes lingers, fingers brushing the Taurus print encoded with that impossible gap. She imagines a future shepherd opening the ivory envelope during some distant crisis of speech, another Babel, another Pentecost, and remembers Tagle's inaugural reminder: air bears breath, breath bears word, word bears world. She wonders whether those 3 seconds were only the first syllable of a sentence the cosmos has been composing since before quarks coalesced. She wonders whether the next syllable might arrive not as sound but as action, mercy sudden as sea wind, justice subtle as olive bloom. Every night she leaves the archive at 9:55, walks the dim corridors past frescoed angels, and steps into a courtyard where vines throw silver patterns under lantern light. She waits 3 minutes. At 9:58, she closes her eyes, listens. Sometimes cicadas hush, sometimes traffic mutes, sometimes nothing unusual occurs at all. Yet always she feels the faintest tug, as though the sky above her is a great lung, drawing in quiet. It lasts only 3 seconds, yet afterward the stars seem nearer, the cobblestones kinder beneath her feet. She inhales, exhales, and walks on, carrying the hush with her like a private key to a language that belongs not to tongues or liturgies, but to the shared, trembling, indestructible act of being. And somewhere, perhaps in the Horsehead Nebula or in the subatomic vaults of every human chest, the name waits. Not impatient, not indifferent, but alive in the gap between heartbeats, ready to answer whenever the world dares to remember, kneel, and speak, ready to echo back returned, until all creation finally replies in the only grammar eternity understands. Amen.